Hi everyone, it's Ashley Tea Garden Paper Crafts. Welcome back to our next tutorial in Junk Journal Journey 2025. Last week we made the cover. This week we are going to sew our signatures in. So I gave you guys some homework after the last tutorial to put together your signatures. So I have my signatures together, how I want them to be. I've added some extra pages and stuff. I've inked my edges. And I have binder clipped them together so that I know what's the top and everything is together the way that it should be. So I want to show you next how I bind signatures. So I use a piece of paper that is the same length as my spine. Okay. And then we'll set our signatures aside real quick. What you'll need is an awl or some sort of pokey tool, a needle and thread for sewing. If you can find waxed thread, use waxed thread. I'm all out of mine, so I don't have that. Scissors for cutting, something to make a mark with, and a ruler. You don't have to measure, but I recommend it if you want your signatures to be even. So what I start with is I start by measuring my spine. And my spine is a little under 2 inches. So I'm going to kind of go in the middle here. And that will give me my spots for where I want my signatures to be sewn in. Okay? So I know that. And then we're going to measure our length of our spine, and mine is about 8.5 inches, I believe. Yeah, just about 8.5 inches. So I'm going to come in. You'd be better off making these marks with a pencil rather than a pen for here. So let me grab a pencil. I grabbed something to make a mark and then I thought better of it. So I'm going to line up my ruler and I'm just going to make a mark here and here at 1 inch in, and then we'll come from the top and do it again, 1 inch and 1 inch. And then I'm going to mark halfway between those two. So we are at 6.5 inches, so 3 inches in, and then we'd be 1, 2, 3 inches in. So halfway between would be here and here. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we want to make sure that these marks, I don't know if you can see it real well, but I have 3 sets of marks on my spine. We're going to want to make sure that these are now in line with where we want them to be. So I was a little off on that one. And then erase. That's why I said you might want to do this in pencil. Okay. Oops, fix our marks there. And let's fix our marks down here. You're pretty darn close. Okay, so then, now that I have that, next thing I want to do is I'm going to take my paper that's folded in half, and I'm going to line it up with my marks here and see if I am kind of straight, and I am not. If you're a perfectionist, you may have a better way to do this than I do. I am not really much of a perfectionist. So close enough is good enough for me. I can always cover up mistakes. Okay, so now that I have those in place, what I want to do is I want to mark those on my paper, because this is going to be my template for poking the holes in my signature. So we're going to start by poking our holes in our spine. Okay, so be careful. If you have like a thing, you know, they make those 3D printed things that you can use for books, punching the holes and stuff. If you have one of those, great. I don't. I keep meaning to have my friend print me one, and I don't. So we're going to line up. We're going to push through. Watch your fingies underneath. You want to make sure that you're keeping your fingers away from the pokey tool. Do not poke yourself. I have done it. It hurts. Okay, so we've got holes for our 2 signatures now. And it looks like something like that on the outside. We will cover that up once we have our signatures sewn in and stuff. I usually like to ink over the holes, or I'll put something over the spine. Really depends. So next what we're going to want to do is we're going to bring in our signatures. And this is going to be longer than our signatures because it is the length of our spine. So you want to kind of get it even in the center there. Okay? And then what we are going to do is I like to kind of hold mine like this and start with my very first hole. Make sure that we're still even-ish there. Yep, that looks good. And you're going to go push straight down, and then holding it with my thumb, I turn it on its side and push straight through. So that way I'm as close to my spine as possible. Again, this may not work for you, but this is just the way that I bind signatures. Especially if I've got a lot of thick paper. There we go. So there's number 1. And now we will do the same with number 2. And by doing it this way, it kind of helps me get my signatures sewn in on even playing field, so to speak, so that they are relatively the same place in my spine when I sew them in. You could paper clip this in place, or you could have the binder clips hold it in place. I just do it with my thumb because it allows me to kind of realign as I need to. Ooh, come on. If you're using a lot of cardstock and stuff, you may have problems. There we go, getting through. Okay, so we can set our tool aside. We can set our template aside. Next, we need our needle, our thread. And so I see a lot of people that they measure doing 1, 2, 3. If you want to make sure that you've got tons of extra, or if you want to sign, like you want to tie things at the end of your signature, it's a great way to do it. It does leave you with quite a bit extra though. So if that's a problem for you, you may find that you want to do less. I like to have extra. I like to be able to tie my knot comfortably. Okay, next we are going to thread our needle. And I want to give myself quite a bit of extra space. And then next we're going to choose which signature is going on top for our first one. So this is going to be my first signature. So we're going to come in through our center hole. We're doing a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. And I'm going to pull that through, and I'm going to hold on to this little bit here and go through my first hole here. Okay. Bring that up close. So then my next thing is I'm holding my signature here. I'm going to go in through this hole. And on the other side here, I'm going to attempt to find the rest of my hole. Come on, where are you? There you are. Okay. My music paper tore, so it was giving me a different spot than I thought where it was. Okay, so we're going to pull that through. So we went in through the center and out, and then came back in through the top. Now we're going to go back out through our bottom here and down through the outside. Our outside's looking like this. And then we're going to come back in through this center hole. This music paper tore on me. I am not the best person to be teaching you how to sew in signatures. I am not the best at it, but I do my best. Okay, so we want to make sure that when we come through our center hole, we don't go through this thread, and that we are on either side of the thread so that when we pull it taut, we are on either side of this center thread. Okay, so then we want to make sure, see, we've got some slop here, so we want to make sure that we have that. And then hold tight, make sure that we don't have any more sloppage, and make sure that we're tight to our spine. And then we're going to tie a knot. So 1 over, and then going the opposite way, I do 2 over. 1, 2, and tie a knot. If you are not using waxed thread, you might want to put a bead of glue there to keep that from untying on you. I've never had this thread untie, but I have had like embroidery floss untie and some other things like that. So I'm going to take off my top 2 clips. I'm going to leave these 2 on though, just for now, while I get the other signature sewn in. So now we're going to take our other piece of thread. Do the same thing again. Okay. Start in the center. Out through the center. Make sure to hold your center thread. Up through the top, down through the bottom, and back in through the center. And then make sure that your thread is on the opposite side. And then give yourself a pull. Make sure There's a little more slop there than I would like, so I'm going to give it a little bit extra pull. You don't want to pull so tight that you tear your paper, but you don't want to have a lot of slop in your thread on the outside. Okay, once I'm happy with that, we're going to go 1 over and tighten, and then going the opposite direction, we're going to go 1, 2, and tighten. And then we can take off our binder clips. And this time we can take all of our binder clips in because our signatures are now sewn in. Okay, so that's what the outside of our spine looks like right now. You can do, there's lots of different ways to decorate a spine. You can put beading on this as you're sewing in, tons of stuff, but I wanted to make this fairly simple. So let's take a look. So now we have our completed signature, number 1. There's my center page. And then number 2. Center page. And there we are. Signatures are sewn in, and now we have space to begin decorating. So I like to put a little bit of space between my signatures to allow for growth in my journal. So when I close this, it's still pretty narrow, but as we put stuff in it, it's going to get chunkier. So, all right. I will see all of you next week. I hope that this was helpful, showing you how to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch and how to measure to get your signatures in fairly evenly and around the same height. Again, mine are not perfectly at the same height in my signature, but it's not enough that it's going to bother me. If it would bother you, obviously you want to make sure that you're finding a way to do it a little more exact than I can. But this is how I like to do mine. So I will see you in my next one. Thank you for joining me on Junk Journal Journey 2025. Those of you who've stuck with me, I appreciate you when I had to take some time off for work. And I really look forward to continuing this and seeing what all of you create. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.